Hello, I'm Angela Murjani and I'm delighted to introduce you today to an American poet called Robert Frost. He lived across the last bit of the 19th century and the first half of the 20th. He wrote some wonderful poems and we're going to take a look at one of those today. In fact, we're going to take a long and deep look at his poem called A Road Not Taken. This poem is only the second most popular of the poems that Frost wrote. The one that people liked the most was another poem called Stopping by the Woods. Maybe you've heard an excerpt from that poem, those haunting words, miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. But that's not the one we're going to talk about today. Today we're going to take a look at that road not taken. And after we've done this together, you are going to have some questions, perhaps even some comments. Maybe some of you are going to say, hey, I can relate to this poet. And maybe some of you are going to say, nah, I think quite differently from him. Either way, it doesn't really matter. Both are just fine. But first, let's go and have a look at that poem. Robert Lee Frost was an American poet who lived from 1874 to 1963. He is highly regarded as a nature poet, having depicted the rural life of America in the everyday speech of his time. His work frequently used the backdrop of rural New England, which was the northeast part of Northern America where the first settlers came who moved from Europe. One of the finest and most popular of American poets, Frost was first published in Great Britain in 1890s, but soon became extremely popular in the United States, where his poems were commonly read in classrooms and heard from lecture platforms. Frost was frequently honored during his lifetime, receiving the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry 4 times. The natural beauty of the surroundings in which he lived became a rich resource for his poems, and Frost often said that he was led from delight to wisdom, explaining that the extravagant beauty around him gave him deep and profound insights on life. That is also why Frost made what seems at first to be a strange comment. He said, literature begins with geography. That sounds really uncommon, but we can easily understand this in the light of his poetry. He uses these pictures from real life to move into an examination of complex ideas and profound philosophical themes. Frost drew his images from nature. The stars, the streams, trees, paths, snow, and the country farmhouses, all of them became powerful symbols, leading the poet to think upon deeper truths. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet, knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. It has been said that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Everybody who works in advertising, graphic designers, artists, cartoonists, their very livelihood is based upon this truth. Yet, who understands this concept or who has made better use of it since even the beginning of time than a poet? A poet uses word pictures or images to convey complex emotional meaning in a few words. This is a tool on which the very craft of a poet is based. Languages abound with these kind of images. Such images are often known as metaphors, and you find them in whatever language you look at. You may find them in Spanish, you'll surely find them in Telugu, plenty of them in Hindi, and you'll find lots of them in English too. For example, if I were to say, he is as slow as a tortoise, then you would immediately understand what I said. I guarantee you at this moment, some of you are even thinking that so what if he's slow, he's probably steady. And some of you might even be going further and thinking he will win the race, he will achieve something. Now how did that happen without my even saying it? That's because the image which I gave you linked up to an image which you already had in your mind, which was stored there by Aesop's fable from the hare and the tortoise. So you were able to figure out a lot more than I said. And that's what poets accomplish when they make use of images. We'll look at another poet called Robert Burns, who wrote a poem in which he said these words, "My love is like a red, red rose." Now I'm sure in just saying that one line, the poet Burns has conveyed loads of meaning to us. When we imagine a rose in our minds, we immediately think passion. Perhaps some of you are even thinking, oh, some trouble from the thorns. And when we consider the repetition of the word red, my love is like a red, red rose, it conveys intensity. And some of you, if you are imagining a rose in full bloom, then you might be thinking, wow, the poet's love is in full bloom. Well, if you thought all of those things, then Robert Burns achieved just what he wanted to by using the metaphor of a rose to describe his love. You see, without saying too much, he was able to convey a lot in just a few words by using that one word picture. That's what metaphors do. Metaphors convey huge amounts of thought and feeling. Sometimes they bring to our minds things which are abstract, emotions which are so subtle and too complex to be described in many words. But a poet is gifted so that he can bring all of these abstract ideas together and package them, as it were, into one little metaphor. And that's what good communication is all about. A good communicator is one who can package in just a few words a lot of things that he wants to say to those that he's talking to. That's what Frost is going to do in this poem. The art of a good poet depends largely on his finding that one perfect image to convey to us what exactly he wants to say. And in The Road Not Taken, Frost has used an awesome image. It's the image of a pathway which forks or divides into two. It diverges in two directions. The poet stands there, just like many of us, not knowing what to do. Which path should he go down? Should he take the one that's going to the left, or should he take the one that's going right? This dilemma is the image which Frost uses in The Road Not Taken to discuss a few important issues of life. The poem The Road Not Taken is all about choices. The image that the poet uses is of a fork in the road, or of two roads diverging. This is what we encounter in the very first stanza. And the poet is standing there. He has to make a choice. He has to choose one road. This picture is so powerful because it is universal in its application. Regardless of who we are, young or old, rich or poor, educated or not so highly qualified, every day, in fact, several times a day, we are confronted by choices. So we understand. We immediately relate to the poet because we've been there. We've been at that fork. We've stood at that crossroad. We have had junctions in our life when we have had to stop and think, and oh, how we have thought. Which way should we go? This is the dilemma that confronts every human being. Some of the choices that we make don't have serious consequences. Every girl stands in front of her wardrobe every morning and she looks at her clothes and she thinks, oh, what shall I wear? Will I wear the green dress or shall it be the pink one today?
I'll take one chocolate cornetto.
I would prefer a butterscotch ice cream. Oh, I should have taken the chocolate cornetto ice cream. It looks a lot more delicious than mine.
Well, in these matters, what decision we take doesn't really have serious consequences. But there are so many decisions that we do take every day which have long-ranging and far-reaching and serious consequences. Maybe some of you are thinking, what course should I take?
So what's your future plan like?
See, after completing my BA, I'll be going abroad for a job of a translator.
See, whatever choice you make, be sure that you think over it, because finally at the end of the day, you should not regret whatever you've chosen, and it's a very crucial point of your life.
Maybe some of you are thinking, whom shall I marry?
I'm going to get married soon.
So, what are you looking for in the guy?
Like, he must be sensible, he must be fair, tall, yeah, very humorous, yeah.
Okay. See, once you make a choice, you need to be sure of it. You have to stick to it, because once you get married, you cannot turn back.
The effects of these choices will determine how life turns out for us. They are very, very serious choices and decisions that we need to take. And what makes it so hard is that we have no way of knowing what lies ahead. Sometimes we wish we could choose both, or we wish we could choose all, or at least we wish we could peep down and see what lies ahead. How we wish we could do that. But that privilege is not allowed us. The future remains hidden from us. And so we are forced to take a decision. We must decide. We have to take one and drop the other. And we just must hope and believe that the decision that we've taken is the best one that we could have taken at that moment and under those circumstances. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. In stanza 2, the poet is looking at both the roads, and yes, he takes a decision. He says that both roads look the same, but then he decides to take the one that looks like it's been less used and it looks better. In doing so, the poet conveys to us the fact that he's made a choice for the one that is better because it is less used. In other words, he is affirming the nonconformist or the rebel point of view. Now in India, we have a term for this nonconformist. We say, thoda se hatke. We talk about a person who makes a choice which is slightly different from the crowd. Someone who doesn't move with the gang. Maybe if he's a guy, he grows his hair long and wears a ponytail. Maybe if you're a girl and you're nonconformist, then you're one of those who likes to ride motorbikes, or maybe you enjoy driving a truck. I don't know, but a nonconformist is a person who listens to their inner voice. They don't go so much with the crowd, they don't go with what the whole world is saying, but they have something speaking to them on the inside and they take cognizance. They listen to that voice which is speaking to them. And in America, we have another terminology for this. There they say marching to a different drum beat. So this is like the whole world is marching to one drum beat, but there are some people who listen to and hear a different drum beat. So that's what the poet does. He indicates to us that he has taken a choice. He has made a decision to travel by that road which appears to be the one which everybody would not choose. It's a road or a path which only few would choose. So in effect, the poet wants to suggest that he's making a choice for a better road, and by inference, he's trying to say that the better road is the one that's not chosen by the masses, by the crowds, by everybody. That there is a select few, there is a group that is set apart. There are a few who are a cut above the rest, and these folk are the ones who will choose the road less traveled. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet, knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. In stanza 3, the poet describes how both of these roads were beckoning him. Both roads looked equally attractive. In fact, he says, neither path had leaves that had been blackened by people trotting over them. And yet, he thinks that he must choose one now, but he says that he would come back again in the future and take a look at the other road. How like us that is. I know that every one of us can identify with this dilemma that confronted the poet at this moment. We've been there. We've stood at the crossroad and we wanted to take this road and then felt like we must take that road, and then we wanted to change our minds and go back down the other road. And so the poet rationalizes and he says, okay, I'll come back another day and I'll take the road which I can't take today. But we know, and the poet knew, that that would never happen. Once you walk down the road, other paths open up, other doors open up, and you keep moving from one to the other so that it becomes impossible to go back to those choices which you excluded yourself from the day you took a choice in favor of one. Now, this is such a common human predicament that when the poet talks about it, we can so relate to him. Whenever we take a decision for one thing, by default, we exclude ourselves from all the other options, all the other possibilities. They close for us. As much as we would like them to remain open, we do know in our heart of hearts that they are forever closed. For example, if today you take up accounting, it's very unlikely that 5 years down the line you can say, hey, I think I'll go for genetic engineering. And you turn your back and come back in another career direction. I don't think it's going to happen. Likewise, if you're a guy and you are marrying Neeta today, I don't think 4 years down the line you can change your mind and say, hey, no, I think I like Rita better. Or if you are a girl, no way that you can dump Farooq for Shahrukh in a few years from now. Once you take a decision, you have to run with it for your whole life. And that's what the poet is talking about. That yes, we have to run with it, but there is also always in the back of our minds that element of regret, that element of doubt which haunts, which nags us. Did we take the right decision? Did we do the right thing? Should we have done the other thing? Should we have gone the other way? Should we have picked the other career? Should we have chosen the other person? These thoughts will constantly be there in our minds. But in our heart of hearts, we know that once we've decided, there is no going back. Once we have taken a road, there's no going back to the other road. I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere, ages and ages hence. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. In stanza 4, the poet takes a leap of imagination into the future. He says that he knows that many years down the line, looking back upon this incident when he was compelled to take a decision, he says that he would take a sigh. Now, the poet remains ambiguous in that he does not tell us whether this would be a sigh of relief, or would it be a sigh of regret, or indeed would it be a sigh of satisfaction. Now, that is so like all of us, isn't it? When we take our decisions, we hardly know how they're going to end up. I know Many of us are even at this moment thinking about some decision that we took way back. Decisions come back to confront us with the choices that we've made. They almost stand before us and ask, was that the right thing for you to have done at that moment? If you had done this, would life have not been better? Or indeed, would life have not been worse? And this makes Robert Frost come so alive to me. And I know that this is what's happening to you too, because you've been in the same position. Life has its way with us, doesn't it? There is this old saying that says, the grass is always greener on the other side. When we look at other people's lives, often our own choices come back to haunt us and we think, oh, we had an opportunity to do that, but we let it go. Or we should have done this, it would have turned out better. Suddenly, there's a shift in the tone of the poet. From ambiguity, he moves towards affirmation. There's a positive note as the poet ends the poem by saying that he is glad he made that choice. He supports his decision to take the road that's less traveled. It's almost as if he's congratulating all those people who don't move with the crowd, all those people whose lives are set apart, all of those people whose lives are different because of the choices that they made. All of a sudden, the poet says that he knows that his life is different because of that choice which he made. He says that is what made all the difference to his life. And it's almost as if the poet is making a quantitative and a qualitative statement here in saying that in making that difficult choice, he chose what was more challenging. He took up what was going to be more difficult. Possibly, he's even talking about taking a stand morally, because when we do take a stand morally, that's always the more difficult path. It reminds me of another poem by a poet called Rossetti called Uphill. In that poem, the poet Rossetti talks about how this path of life is like walking up a hill, and it's a winding path, and the higher you get, the more difficult, the more obstacles and the more challenges. But yet Rossetti talks about the satisfaction that one achieves in walking this hill, in climbing upwards. And there's sort of that same element of pride in taking the road less traveled in Robert Frost's poem. He supports that choice. He affirms his decision. He almost pats himself on the back in saying that, yes, in looking back, I know I did the right thing.